is it good morning for you? You are West Coast or you're
I'm
Brooklyn?
I'm normally West Coast. I'm actually in Michigan right now at my in-laws' cottage. So
Wow,
so it's kind of morning. Yeah, it is. It's quarter to
kind of morning. Well, before I talk about Rosemead,
yeah.
a question for you. Captain Kirk is climbing a mountain. Why is he climbing a mountain?
You dug up an old gem. Quite right.
I
Um,
I I didn't realize that was you.
oh,
I
no
didn't
kidding.
I didn't realize you were the guy from the Rinse. I didn't realize that was the same Will Bates this whole time.
Oh, well, it's been quite a journey. What can I say?
And the small world connecting end before we talk about Rosemead is the theme song to this series is done by Steve Schiltz.
No way. Oh my
Yeah.
God. And Steve played guitar on when we redid Shatner of the Mount. We called it Captain of the Mount. That's Steve playing the guitar. So that's crazy. What a small world.
So it all comes back to the Strokes and the Lower East Side and
Yeah,
pianos and all
man.
that kind of stuff. But in your career, when did you go from being band guy in the Rinse to a proper scoring guy who never stopped working on film and TV projects?
Right. I mean, to be completely honest, it's the thing that I've wanted to do since I was 6 years old.
Mhm.
I sang the score of Star Wars to my parents, and they promptly bought me a violin that I then tortured them with for several years. And it was always the thing that I kind of wanted to grow up doing. And I ended up finding my way here in a very odd way. I met Steve because I started obviously being in bands and stuff, but I rather naively thought that scoring commercials would be a way for me to get into scoring movies. And of course it wasn't, but it was a way that taught me a lot about what I do day to day now. So yeah, for about 7 years, I was an in-house composer at a music house in New York. And then I started like moonlighting for Sundance indie filmmakers and very gradually got into scoring films. And the entire time I was in a band, trying to make that work. And I had a solo project in London. I did put out some techno when I was in my early 20s. So I've always had, I think the bigger picture for me was always composing. I always wanted to score to picture, but I always had this other stuff going on. And as my former bandmate, James Rickman, used to say, particularly with the Rinse, we just managed to dodge success like skilled ninjas for a good 7 or 8 years, just somehow never quite made it, which I'm weirdly grateful for now at this point, because I feel like because of that, I had to feed myself the only way that I knew how, and that was scoring ads and then the odd short film, and then very gradually the film and TV kind of eclipsed all the commercials, and fortunately I'm in a place where I can finally do what I love. But it took me a minute to get here, I guess. It's the long
The
way.
strategy on the Rinse would be you announce a reunion show, make it in 5 years from now, and you
Yep.
have to do the math of, well, when we stopped, we were bringing 100 people a night. The math compounds. It'll be 250 people come out for that one-off show.
There you
So
go.
you need to start planning that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, that's good. I was actually telling a story. Someone was asking me about touring, and I was like, that was one of the reasons why the band kind of fell apart. And the last tour we did, we were on the West Coast, and we drove to Las Vegas, and we
Mhm.
thought we should call the promoter, just make sure it's all good. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, right, yeah, of course, totally." And we get to the gig, there's a poster on the door that just said "Band from New York, 2:30 a.m." It's just like, okay, I think it might be time to call this a night. So that was the end of that.
Yeah. So you take a film like Rosemead and gets to do Tribeca and all that.
Oh.
Is that ever a thought for you, the film festival circuit, or do you just find out like everybody, hey, by the way, you're going to be on that red carpet in a month?
I mean, I find out when the filmmakers find out. Sometimes I find out a bit later. I actually just found out a couple of days ago that another film that I just finished is going to Telluride. And I feel like sometimes the composer is like the last person to know. But in the case of Rosemead, Eric told me, pretty early on. But yeah, it's always exciting to see where these things go and what the plan ends up being. Festivals tend to be the launch pad, right? That's where you
Sure.
start to understand what the future is going to be, what the sales are like. I My career kind of started that way as well. I was with a small movie called Another Earth at Sundance and had this sort of fairy tale situation where the movie sold with a huge price tag considering how it was made. And then I got the phone call from the agent on the way to the airport. You know, it was all very magical. And I think that's very much the case of these festivals, and Tribeca is one of them. That's, you know, it's a place where creativity and talent is nurtured in such a lovely way, and it's always just so delightful to be on the journey with a project like this.
Are you able to compose for multiple projects at the same time?
I am, yes. And I feel like that has a lot to do with my background as a as a band leader, and also as a, you know, working in commercials in my 20s. I kind of thrive on it, to be honest. I love to have various different things going on. I remember when Rosemead was happening, I was on a couple of TV shows at the same time, and I generally have like a rig. I try to sort of compartmentalize the project. So it will be like, all right, this set of instruments and these devices are for this project, and this is for this project. And it's sort of an easy way of making sure that the worlds don't overlap. And I do find myself having projects that, you know, inspire or cause other things to happen for other ones, if that makes sense. Like certain sonic choices can kind of result in the other movie, and I love that. I think that's really helpful. And my projects tend to be very rare, very varied, and
That
yeah.
actually is something I'm super interested in because I like to talk when I'm speaking with a band that's been around for 40 years and they primarily do arena kind of shows, but then they pop up and they'll do underplays like, oh, we're going to do a random club tour here. You find out that there's the drum kit and setup that they have stationed in Europe. And
Right.
they ship that one for Japan, and then they have the East Coast one and the West Coast one. Do you basically have rigs all over the world?
Um, kind of. I mean, I have a rig in my house, which I'm very, which is quite a recent thing. We just built a studio there that's lovely. That's basically where I have two kids. You know, I feel like I'd be on my fifth marriage by now if I didn't have a studio at home. And then I
Right.
have my larger facility, Fall on Your Sword, named after the Captain Kirk project.
Yeah.
That's in North Hollywood. I'm on my way back from Spain because in the 70s, my grandparents bought a house in Ibiza. And every year I go there to visit my mom with my kids and everything. And I have a studio there that's this place in the woods. And I find myself, I just finished an album there this summer, actually.
Oh,
So in that regard, yeah, I feel like because of what I have to do, I mean, I came to Michigan for a week and I had to go to Guitar Center to buy a little MIDI keyboard because I realized I'd forgotten to bring one here. I left it in Spain. Um, we're not really able to stop. You know, people just assume that I work all the time, which is true. And unfortunately, when I travel, I just have to keep going, and I love that as well. But you know, there's sort of good sides and bad sides of that, I suppose. That sometimes people around me need to understand that I have to nip off and finish a cue every now and again. Um,
so you came to Michigan for R&R, or is that your
but
home?
yeah, we always, when the kids break up from school, we go to Ibiza for 3 weeks, and then I think we're the only family in the world that fly from Ibiza to Grand Rapids once a year. Um, and then, you know, there's a week here on the way home, and then we go to LA. But yeah, I guess all that to say, it's hard for me to sort of leave town for more than a few days without being able to carry on working on a project. So yes, I find myself having to have places where I can work wherever I'm traveling.
Then a kind of follow up to the whole work thing about what you do now. Being in a touring band is a nocturnal existence, unless you're the opener in an amphitheater tour where you're going on at 6 p.m.
I
Aside from that, it's a nocturnal existence. And being a composer, I assume, is more of like a 9 to 5 daytime thing. How are you able to make that transition to treating music like office hours?
Yeah, I guess I've always treated it like a job. You know, my wife is a painter, and something that we kind of connected over very early on in our relationship is that she shares this similar belief about creativity, that there's no such thing as the lightning bolt. There's work. Like
Oh,
you gotta like it's something that she kind of was inspired by a painter called Francis Bacon, who had the same idea that you gotta just get up in the morning, do the work, and that's how the inspiration comes, and I really share that. And I've always been that way. And I think even with the bands, and maybe that's why they all fell apart. But you know, like doing the work and treating it like a job is sort of the key to being inspired. I feel like that's always, I don't tend to sit around waiting for something to happen. I just get my head down and get on with it. And normally something good happens. And if it doesn't, it will in the end, is sort of my thought process with that stuff. So yeah, I feel like it wasn't really a huge shift for me. And while I was doing the band stuff, the only way that I've ever really known how to feed myself is by writing music. So it's always been in the background.
I find that when we were kids, we're within the same age range, within 10 years, without saying numbers, without saying
Sure.
numbers.
Yep. Fair
Um,
play.
Growing up, though, all my favorite movies, you look at who composed the movie, and it was generally just some classical person that or orchestrator. And then nowadays, you look at most of the films and you go, oh, the guy from Arcade Fire did that one. Oh, the
Totally.
guy from Passion Pit did that one. It's
Yep.
basically band people have turned into the scoring people, or that, at least that's my take on it. My question, now that you have steady work with all this, are you also hoping to do co-writing for bands, or are you just staying in your lane as a
Um,
composer?
That's a great question. I actually, one of the things that I did while I was in Spain, I'm working with a singer called Bishop Briggs right now. She and I did a main title together a couple of years ago, and she reached out about me doing a record with her. So I'm doing that, and then I have another project with another singer. Weirdly, I've found myself in this world where I am doing co-writes, and I've always done the odd little project like that. Like I did a film called Bliss with Mike Cahill a while ago, and Sky Edwards from Mochiba, she and I wrote a song for her to sing. And I've always had relationships with singers, and I love singers hugely. You know, was trying to be one myself, frankly, but I feel like
You weren't trying, you were
oh,
a
bless
singer.
you.
Yeah.
That's sweet of you. But yeah, I feel like I'm kind of somehow going back into that world, which I'm really happy about. And it's again, it's sort of like one thing is feeding the other. Like sometimes the movie scoring is like a very useful tool when you're working with a singer and trying to create a universe. And I think it's helpful for me, and then it feeds the work itself as well. So
Well,
yeah.
that's also unique because when they do those writer camps or writer sessions, they go, do you do top line, meaning do you write the melody and
Right.
that the hooks, or are you an engineer type doing the chords and the background stuff? But it sounds like you're interchangeable
Yeah,
where you could
kind of
do both.
doing all of it. Yeah, I mean the project that I'm on at the moment with is it's with a singer called Jenna Wad, and she and I there's a song in a show that is going to be coming out in September, so we figured we'd capitalize on that and make an album around it. And really, it was like while dinner was being made, I'd nip down to the studio to the shed in the woods and do a bass line and a chord change, and then she'd come down and sit on the couch and write some words, and then 2 hours later we'd have a song, and we basically made a record that way. And that's, I think that's because of being a composer that I'm able to do that kind of stuff and do it quickly. It's all about
Sure.
speed sometimes. So
Well,
yeah.
two quick questions and then I let you go. You ready?
Yeah, go on.
First one, the basis of my friendship with one Stephen Schiltz,
Go. Yep.
largely rooted in 80s metal and shredders. And people don't realize what a fan he is of the fast playing of Red Beach from Winger and so forth.
I'm gonna have to bring
You
this up.
have
Interesting.
that,
Okay.
do you have that 80s metal background, or is your friendship entirely devoid of discussion about memes and 80s metal with Steve?
We have somehow skirted around that. I'm not really an 80s metal kind of person. I hate to say it, I'm probably more of a 50s jazz person who stumbled into electronic music. But having said that, I love the guitar. I've never met anyone. There's one other person that I know whose name is Quentin Collins, who's a trumpet player, but Steve is the other person I know that I feel like that instrument is just an extension of his body. I've never
Sure.
really met anyone like that before, and it's just like it's so effortless for him and natural. And it's if it came from 80s metal, then good on him. But
And
I feel like he can kind of do anything, that guy. It's amazing.
he can. And related to that, I go to a lot of live music shows and gigs and tours and all that because I'm covering it. It's part joy, part work. When you yourself are the touring artist and you're a family man and all that, there's less time for you to do that. But is there a band that you will never miss when they're coming through town?
Yeah. This is a bit of a dirty secret, but I think that person would be Pat Metheny. Yeah, I know. I
No,
know.
no, I'm not judging.
Um,
I love the secret shredding. Level 42 all day for me.
there you go. Okay, that makes me feel a bit better. But yeah, I, I'm I feel like his shows are a bit like going to a fish show. Not that I'm a fish head particularly. My sister-in-law is a diehard fish head, but
Sure.
not me. But I do feel like his gigs are kind of similar to that. They're sort of epically long, special, kind of crazy events where every performance is different. So yeah, he's someone that I won't miss. And the other person is probably also a guitarist and something of a mentor to me when I was a kid, whose name is Steve Hackett, and he
Oh
was
yeah.
he was in.
I've interviewed him a few times,
Have you
Mr. Hack.
really?
Yeah.
Amazing. So I was fortunate enough. He kind of, when my father died, my parents were great friends with him, and he sort of took
Wow.
me under his wing a bit. Like the first ever recording studio I went to was Steve's, and I played on that Genesis Revisited record as a
I,
sax player. Yeah,
I did not know that.
I love Steve. So yeah, I think he's coming to LA in November, so I'll see him then. But he's also someone who I'm just constantly in awe of. So
Well, the real now closing question here, because I didn't know about that and your filmography, discography, etc. It's not really cohesive in one place where I can find it. For somebody to figure out what you played on, is there a best way, in your opinion, to track that? Is it your website?
I probably not. I don't. Is it like Discogs or something? Maybe that would be
There's Discogs, All Music Guide, Wikipedia, your
yeah,
bio, what your bios sent out by your team. I don't know. Where do we
yeah.
look for you, Will?
Okay, that's excellent. These are all good questions. I mean, I will tell you that the Wikipedia thing is strangely absent. I think there's a footballer called Will Bates that
Yeah.
somehow usurped me on that one. But yeah, I think Discogs is probably a spot, but also the Fall on Your Sword website is probably a good place to begin. And then of my Instagram, which is Will Bates Composer.
Paltrocast.